I want to begin with the mind-body connection, and partially because I'm getting a little bit older, my body's talking back to my mind a little bit more than it used to. My mind is writing checks my body can't always cash, which is super curious. So I'm just wondering about your latest thinking around mind-body connection as it relates to our ability to perform to our potential.
Yeah, I mean, this is really, I think, the question that got me into sports science is that I come from the background as a runner, and I was always wondering, like, at what point am I limited by my body or am I limited by my brain? And where's the boundary, and can we move the boundary? And I think there was a real revolution, let's say, 15 years ago-ish, is when scientists really started to take this idea seriously, that you can't just put someone on a treadmill, measure their oxygen consumption or their muscle twitches or whatever, and understand what the limits of their performance are.
Right.
I would say now, that was a sort of paradigm shift, and now things are kind of leveling out where we're still struggling. Okay, now everyone recognizes that there is a mind-body connection, and that it matters, and that it actually is it is the final decision maker as to whether you can push harder or have to back off. How does it work? Like, what's going on in the brain? What are the connections? And I don't think we have answers to those, like final answers to those questions yet, because it is hard to look in the brain.
Yeah, of course. What do you think some of the possibilities are? And maybe we can think of it in terms of like a feed forward drive to move or to exercise or push ourselves. And then of course there's the feedback from the body up to the brain. Maybe there's something that's governing that. Like where do you think we're at on that?
Yeah, so my general philosophical approach to these deep questions is that it's probably all of the above.
Yeah.
So in the endurance science world, there was a big debate between does your brain does it dial back its limits based on feed forward? Like it's sending signals to the body, and when it detects that it's sending like really hard signals, it knows that you're tired, and so it dials back. Or is it a feedback mechanism where there is, distress signals like lactate levels are high or whatever the case may be, and it's going back to your brain and telling you to dial it back? I don't know the answer for sure, obviously,
Yeah.
but if I have to place my money, it's like all of those things are like there's 10 scientists with 10 theories. I'm like, you're right. It doesn't have to be just your theory. We can have different limits that are pulling us back in different contexts. So there can be times when mental fatigue is the key thing. Like the reason you can't lift the weight is because you were up late last night with a sick child or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's mental fatigue that's getting. But there can be situations where the reason you can't lift the weight is that your muscles have gone into some metabolic state because you've pushed them so hard they're tearing, and so it's really a local physical limitation that's hitting. So in reality, I think I guess if I was trying to give a useful takeaway, let's say, it would be that all of this stuff gets integrated into your subjective perception of how hard something is. And so when I say, I don't think I can maintain this pace for the last 2K of my run, that's not just all in my head, but it's not just all in my muscles either. My head is integrating how I'm feeling, what I was doing last night, what the temperature is, all these things together. And so the greater that we can dial into how we feel, I think that's the best way of getting the best of both worlds, of understanding what our bodies and what our minds are capable of at any given moment.
Super interesting. I think it's really helpful for people because if you're listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, people are interested in exercise or interested in health, wellness. And when you exercise, you're either exercising for a longer period of time, or maybe you're at a spin class, you're pushing really, really hard, or you're lifting some weights, you're noticing that your muscles are getting fatigued, and it's hard to get to those last few reps. So perhaps you and I could tease out what some of those different factors are that are associated with the limits of what we're capable of. Maybe there's a few in the body and one or two in the brain. Let's explore some of those. So let's say you're out for a run, you're on a pace, and it's like, I don't know, I'm not sure how this is going to go.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple. So there's some classic ones, the 20th century body limits that are real. And so if you've been out on this run for 2 hours, let's say, there's a good possibility that you're running out of fuel. Like your muscles are getting depleted from the energy sources that they store.
Right.
And so if you were to take a swig of sports drink, you might find that you feel better. Even before you take a drink and immediately you feel better, and it's like that stuff's still in your stomach. It hasn't made it to your muscles, but your brain is like, okay, we got some fuel on the way, so we can pull back the brakes a little bit. So fueling is one thing that, and definitely if you're busy and I said if you're out for 2 hours, but let's say you've been at the office all day and you forgot to eat lunch because you were busy or whatever.
Yeah.
You may be depleted from the moment you start that run. And so fueling is one thing. Temperature is another straightforward one. If it's summer and if it's 35 degrees, if you're overheating, it's not that your muscles are boiling yet, but your brain is very highly attuned to core temperatures.
Right.
So that's one end of the spectrum is these physical limits that your brain is monitoring the dashboard for things like temperature and fuel in the same way that your car's dashboard is monitoring that. The harder ones are like the mental side, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't know what, like the studies on mental fatigue are like, we're going to sit you in front of a computer. You're going to play a game where it's like arrows flashing on a screen and you're going to tap left or right. And it's not hard, but it requires sustained focus. Mm-hmm. And I've tried these protocols. So I tried a mental training program for like 12 weeks leading up to a marathon. And the goal was to move up to like 90 minutes of sitting at the computer going tap, 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 tap. And it's like 5 minutes, you're like, man, I can't sustain this focus. It's really mentally challenging. And so then you start to think of like, well, when I'm on deadline, I'm writing an article and I'm going to sit there for more than 90 minutes really trying to dial it up. And you realize that's a limitation. And neurochemically, what's happening? I mean, there's probably a lot of different things. Adenosine is a neurotransmitter that's associated with mental fatigue.
Right.
That's what caffeine tries to interfere with. So that's why caffeine can help out. But so there's that. Those are maybe the two ends of the spectrum of like the simple mechanical things. Your muscles are too hot versus your perception of how much mental energy you've already spent and whether you're able to harness your body's limits.
Interesting. And there's also, I read a little while ago about neurotransmitter depletion and maybe being a potential thing as well, which is kind of more advanced than we need to get into. And it's just like,
but that's exactly what's going to be happening when I'm sitting at the screen for 90 minutes.
Right.
Is I'm deploying neurotransmitters of various types, whether it's dopamine or serotonin and all these things, or adenosine can function as a neurotransmitter, and if I keep doing the same thing over and over again, eventually the mechanisms that you're going to get buildup of some or depletion of others, and that's going to affect your subjective perception of whether you can keep doing this.
You remind me of a study we did a number of years ago, pre-COVID, in my lab. We had soccer referees come in, and we exercised them on a treadmill to exhaustion, because that's what you do. It's fun to make other people go to exhaustion. And they had to do that test that you were describing on the computer as they were going intermittently throughout the course of starting the run all the way through till they were completely depleted. And I think they were out there for like 40 minutes on the treadmill. And our hypothesis was that as they would become more fatigued, they would start to make errors in their decision making. And it was actually the opposite, which was really curious. And what we think might have happened is that when they were going easy, they were distracted. And then as it got harder and harder, they got more and more focused. They started to block out those distractions. They weren't looking around the room. They weren't thinking about anything else. They're
in fight or flight mode, right?
Yeah, so that was really, really curious. So anyway, that just popped into my brain as you were describing that.
And there's some analogous research coming from the other end. So let's say with these mental fatigue studies that I described, you do this mental fatigue task, then you get on the treadmill and your endurance is hurt. Well, they also do these studies with soccer players. And so they want to find out, how does this affect not just your endurance at a given pace, but how does it affect different types of running? How does it affect your decision making, your tactical? They put them in virtual reality, and the ball comes and you have a split second to decide, am I going to pass, am I going to shoot? Did you make the right choice? And so with the physical side, what they find is endurance is compromised so that for the easy or slow or medium running, they're going to go slower. But in this simulated soccer game, when they have to sprint, they can sprint just as fast. So this is comparable to what you're saying.
Right.
So you're mentally fatigued in a soccer game. If the ball's right there and it's an open net, you can still max out. But it's all the other times when you're jogging, you're out of position, I need to get up the field, or play is moving, I need to reposition. You're jogging a little more slowly. So you're just a little bit less likely to be in the right position, to anticipate what other people do. And then when you have to make a decision, your reaction time is a little bit slower and you make more wrong decisions.
Yeah.
And these are things you can't you can't detect in yourself, right?
Yeah.
You can't tell that, oh, I reacted in 250 milliseconds instead of 200 milliseconds. And if you make a wrong decision 5% more of the time, you're not really aware that that's happening. But this is what mental fatigue is doing.
Interesting.
When you're mentally tired, it's compromising in these ways that are very hard to detect.